right, welcome back, everyone, to session 2 of our day of discussion and needs assessment. If you're just joining us today, my name is Jacqueline Pilati, and I am co-facilitating today with, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague.
I am Hannah Traggis, and I will be with you for the rest of the afternoon.
All right. So, just a quick revision of our community agreements as we move on deeper into this work. We're going to commit to staying engaged as much as we can, listen to each other from a place of love, experience discomfort, and appreciate productive struggle. Please speak your truth, speak from the I, but also be humble and acknowledge that we're not all experts. If you find yourself using jargon, please clarify that for folks. We're all not coming with the same background and level of expertise. And expect and accept non closure. So, this is a first step in a long process of discovery for us. And so, we're happy to struggle together in community to come to new understandings together. So I'm going to pass it off to Hannah, who is going to help us, recap and kind of help us frame our thinking moving forward for the session.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, a couple of points that we wanted to clarify from the first session. One is the concept of this Northeast region. And it's actually a really, really big region, and it spans 2 countries. It spans several well-defined subregions and many, many states. So in the Northeast, we consider from Virginia and West Virginia through Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, up through New England, and into Eastern Canada, including Quebec, Prince Edward Island, Ontario, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Labrador. And we recognize that these broader regions can be divided into much smaller subregions, such as New England and the Mid-Atlantic. Some of these regions are regions of transition. The Mid-Atlantic is a space that transitions between the northeastern and southeastern parts of North America. These regions are under all sorts of different types of governance, from the municipality level up to federal levels and even international levels. So we just wanted to clarify that while we are looking at our direct communities, that we keep in mind this idea that Fred Wiseman has taught us about concentric ecology. We look to our immediate, surroundings and environment, but thinking in the levels that emanate out from where we are and how those levels are all connected and how they all are related. And one other point we just want people to keep in mind is that when we are talking about our seed system, we're also talking about our food system and the resiliency or fragility. We think today, some people think we have a great, seed system. You can open any catalog and order a bunch of seeds. And I think we all know better. As homeowners, we see seed catalogs closed to us online for ordering, come back next week while we serve commercial customers. And we've also seen, our food systems on the brink of collapse because we are so dependent on the centralization of those systems to regions that have nothing, that aren't even geographically close to us. And so seed and food are so interconnected that when our seed system is in jeopardy, is vulnerable, is frail, our food system is also, and not just getting the food on our table, but getting the appropriate foods for our bodies and for our cultures. So we just wanted to make those 2 points, and then I'd like to open up the next 5 minutes or so as a little bit of a recap of session 1. We ended session 1 with the breakout groups reporting back on what your findings, and we were not able to spend the time to open that up for any sort of discussion. So I just want to invite people to unmute if they want to say anything that they've been thinking about since session 1, and if there's anything else that people would like to share. And then once we spend a few minutes doing that, I will we'll move on into the next big discussion, big breakout. And if any of the moderators and facilitators want to jump in and throw a couple things out there.
I'll say something.
Yes. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Hannah. I just, after reflecting for the past 2 hours, I thought it would have been nice at the beginning of the conference to have that same groundwork that we did today, so everybody has a reference point to talk about privilege and oppression. And yeah, thanks for that this morning. That was good.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I was the group rep for the community seed work group. And I actually just wanted to bring up the fact that when we were talking, we did discuss the different experience level of the people who attended the conference, as well as the different regions of people who did attend the conference, and also me who did not attend the conference at all. And I'm here for the seed day. And I really appreciate the clarifying the concept of what exactly the Northeast region looks like, and what exactly that does encompass. And in the community seed work breakout, we did also discuss the desire and need for community resources, as well as figuring out how to support by POC and getting land access, because seed sovereignty and therefore food sovereignty cannot exist without access to land. And also just a suggestion about having different tiers of information about what different sessions are going into. For example, is this going to be a beginner? Is this going to be intermediate? Or is this going to be advanced? Am I going to have to look up different types of jargon, as Jackie mentioned? Do I need to know exactly what it means when you say we're going to be propagating different types of seeds? This is an annual versus biennial. So that type of jargon. And just wanted to say that I'm really glad to be here and that I would love to network with other people, as well as I did recall over the breaks that there is actually a website called Community Seed Network that is kind of like working in partnership, I think, with the Seed Savers Exchange. And you can actually go to that free website, check out the visual map, and make a free profile online and connect with other seed savers in your community, and also different seed libraries that are already ongoing in your community. And I can put the website for that in the chat.
Yeah, thank you for that, Caitlin. And thank you, bringing up that idea of identifying tracks for different areas of expertise, I think is a brilliant one. And I'm just curious, and feel free to turn off your video if you want to ignore my question for putting you on the spot. But since you didn't attend the conference, how did you come to hear about today?
So I actually am a member of the Seed Savers Exchange, as just like someone who is interested in seed saving and trying to get into that. And they actually put out in their latest email blast about the fact that the NOFA NY was having this free seed session today. And I decided to register to see what was going on, because I am interested in trying to kind of make a seed community hub in the Mid-Atlantic region, and thought this would be a great resource to see what exactly other people are doing and taking stock of how everyone everyone has been changing due to COVID, and how everyone is adjusting to it. So I was just curious about what's already out here and how can I be part of it. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I know some people are here today from Seed Savers Exchange, including Emily, and she's already expressed how glad she is that the email reached you. So, and thank you for sharing that link in the chat.
Hey there, folks. This is Heron. Just wanted to say thank you, Caitlin, for joining us after not having joined the conference. I just wanted to just reflect with everybody that actually this seed conference thing is basically like unrelated to NOFA New York, in the sense that we're a collaborative partnership, but like this is a grassroots thing that occurred this week. Is really like a group effort of a lot of folks on this meeting, but also lots of other folks that aren't here today volunteered. And NOFA New York's been our collaborator, so it's been really good to do that. And I just want to uplift the fact that everybody did this for volunteers, which is, I mean, in of itself, like an amazing thing. And that includes me. We're all volunteers. So yay to all of us. I just want to say that, like, that's a pretty cool thing that we didn't actually really, we do have a grant that we got that UVM partnered with us, another great partner. And we've all put in our time and energy for sure. But just yay for community and seed.
All right. So Hannah, are we ready to go back to?
Yeah, I think we are.
All right.
Yeah, so session 2, this is a time we hope that you will all dig deep. We want to take stock of what we have, physical, emotional, however, whatever you think that we have right now that exists in the Northeast seed system. And as we move into the third session, we'll be taking a look at that and framing our thoughts and divisioning what more we need, what we don't need, where we want to go, where we think we should go, and how we think we should get there. So keeping all of those things in mind, we will go into our next breakout session to take stock of what we have. And the breakout groups will be the same as they were in the first session, which we actually condensed these 6 groups into 4. So we'll be going back into those 4 groups, and Jackie is going to, the protocol for operating in the breakout group is the same as it was before. You'll have a facilitator, and Jackie's gonna just show you the worksheet.
Yeah, so here we can see just a screenshot of the sheet that you were working on before. And so in these 2 columns, looking at strengths and assets, and then challenges and vulnerabilities. And so these are a grouping of categories that we kind of came up with. And so we'll run through them quickly. So germplasm, we're referring to the actual seeds themselves. Seed production, distribution, climate and environment, policy, politics, power and access, markets and economics, information and resources, and finally, community, meaning relationships and communication. So, is there anything that needs to be clarified there before we move on into groups? All right. So, if anyone has questions that pop up, we'll definitely lean on some of the folks in your group to collectively try and figure things out. We're going to be in the main room, and so we hope that you all have productive conversations while you're in your breakout groups.
Okay, sounds like we're ready to go into breakout groups, and I'll be opening those in a second. We have home-based seed, community-based seed work, seed producers, farmers, people in the farmer realm, and plant breeders / seed companies kind of combined. Many of you were able to get in before, and some of you were not, because the breakout room icon apparently doesn't exist for you. But if you want to use it, you have the option to, if you have the breakout room icon. Other folks that don't will put you in the room that you were in. So let's just give us a few seconds to sort ourselves Hogwarts style. Give it a minute.
Wasn't much.
Oh,
All right, welcome back, everyone. It looks like it took a little while for you to come back, so I hope that that means that you were deep in wonderful discussion. So we're just going to quickly um, go over how we're going to be doing our sharing, similar to the way that we did it before, having a representative from each group share out. You're going to have 5 minutes for each group to share out. And while folks are sharing out, if you want to, we encourage you to be engaged by taking notes, thinking of follow-up questions, maybe connecting it to something that came up in your group. And then if we have time at the end, we're going to open it up for everyone to engage in a community discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And do we have a volunteer from a group that would like to report back first? Bill?
Happy to be the icebreaker here. We had a very vibrant discussion, which was cut off. So you'll hear me say "see above," and I'll try to do my best to recollect where we were at with that. But a lot of what we were speaking about in conversation with the strengths and assets and the challenges and vulnerabilities spoke to multiple categories, as I'm sure others have that experience. So I'll just try to quickly go through some of what we had written down here. So with regard to germplasm, the strengths and assets we saw are that we do have some committed seed companies in the Northeast, which are looking out for small seed producers in the Northeast, both in the sourcing of seeds and the testing of seeds to thrive in the Northeast, and also the encouragement of more small growers where applicable. There are some land grant seed breeders who are sharing their germplasm and who are breeding for the public domain. Our unique climate is a strength and a weakness, but the strength means that our seed shed selects very specifically for us. So the breeding that happens in the Northeast is not only exceptional for the Northeast, but can be potentially applicable elsewhere because of the requisite genetic diversity in getting things to adapt to our many microclimates and often challenging conditions. And to speak to that as well, our variable weather results in more genetic diversity in our varieties, which that's exactly what I just said, so I'll skip that. Challenges and vulnerabilities with regard to germplasm. Collective buying power of the Northeast is not met by larger seed companies. The scale of larger farms in other regions drive the available prices, varieties, and breeding priorities, excuse me. Our unique climate is also a weakness and vulnerability for any of us who live in humid environments and have tried to produce beet seed and other things. Changing climate and weather extremes mean that traditionally saved seeds from this region may or may not continue to work for us. So, this just speaks to the work that we're all doing now and the fact that seeds are alive and need to be kept alive and continually cared for. It's hard to determine if seed you are sourcing from is from your ecoregion and hard to market your seed ecoregionally. So this is a point that Sefer brought up specifically with regard to native seed, that the sourcing of native germplasm can be particularly challenging. So with regard to seed production, these strengths we listed, among them that New York State is the third largest acreage of certified organic land. So even though land access in general and the gross acreage, so to speak, of agricultural land in the Northeast is not one of our big strengths. Having a state that has a large amount of certified organic land is a plus from the perspective of seed production. We know how to produce in short, unpredictable seasons in the Northeast compared to other regions. So, in time of climate chaos and adaptation, this is increasingly a necessary skill, as it has always been. The vulnerabilities and challenges, changing climate and weather extremes will lead to issues with seed production. We don't necessarily have the land base for seed production. People need more education around how to produce seed, and we lack processing infrastructure, sort of community-based seed infrastructure. Seed distribution. Again, the strengths are our seed companies in our region are generally excellent with regard to distribution, COVID notwithstanding. We have seed companies that support us and are trying to get small seed growers to do the work. Communities are pretty close together, which makes it easier to move seed about from community to community. And we also have many consumers and community members in close proximity, and a good infrastructure of seed libraries in the Northeast. Shout out to Kay and to Jackie. And challenges, producers are not aware of what it takes to distribute their own seed. So the various hurdles, if you'll call them that, to produce seed as a small seed company, or if you wanted to somehow direct market your seed on farm to capture retail value in the same sense that a CSA or farmers market might do. The knowledge of quality control concerns, which has been discussed to some extent during the conference, but purity of seed, seed-borne diseases, how to set standards, how to test and meet those standards. Unclear how to direct market seed without becoming a seed company, which I've mentioned. And again, the difficulty with regard to native seed on sourcing seed from and distributing seed within your ecoregion. So we felt that the climate and environment was somewhat addressed above. Policy and politics, we just had sort of one shining example that was provided by SEFRA for ecotypical seed, which is that the Pollinator Protection Act in Connecticut requires the Connecticut DOT to use local native seed for pollinator plantings. So wondering if that is a sort of beacon of how we can enact other legislation that that requires the use of local seed where available. Not exactly sure how that speaks to the production of food crops such as vegetables and fruits, but it is a precedent that's been set nonetheless. There's probably too much to say with regard to policy and politics in the challenges that I'm sure other groups will address. We didn't get to that. And then quickly on power and access, we saw it as a strength that there are some great organizations and collaborations in our region that are working to share knowledge and resources between BIPOC farmers and others, but to promote awareness and understanding of racial equity within agriculture and what that would look like. So seeing the challenges and seeing the strengths. So we're fortunate to have some of those organizations in our region. And there are an increasing number of BIPOC-led organizations working to increase seed work and land access, specifically in our region. And then the challenge, as has been mentioned throughout the conference, that land access, particularly for historically marginalized farmers, is still tremendously challenging, and the resources as well. So finding land, accessing that, and then accessing capital in the form of loans or USDA grants, especially within the context of systemic racism with the USDA and so forth. And basically for everything else, we wrote C above. So hopefully it was captured in some form or another. I think I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you, Bill. Could you just remind everyone which group you were a part of?
That would be important, thank you. We are the group that merged seed growers, producers, and farmers who save seed.
Thank you. All right, can we have another group?
Hi, sure. My name is Lauren Brzezowski, and I was in the plant breeder group. I had not attended the conference. I recently finished my graduate work in plant breeding and working somewhere else, but hoping to get back to the Northeast seed system soon, and came here to learn about where everyone's at. So to summarize, our work talking of plant breeders and seed companies, we had a lot of the same threads that Bill had mentioned in terms of the relative abundance of small seed companies in the region and the work that they and other community organizations are doing to promote regional adaptation and varieties. One of the strengths we also talked about were university breeding programs, and also the challenges that come with that too, where there's a general fairly uncertain future about the ongoing funding and strength of public plant breeding programs, and the inequity in who those programs serve now, who the breeders are interacting with to decide plant breeding goals, and how public plant breeding is rewarded both for the people working in it and also through large granting organizations and which work is supported. Some other challenges in terms of germplasm too, we talked about intellectual property protection. So things like PVPs or plant variety protection, how that can impact people's ability to access seed. And we also discussed how some varieties are sometimes only grown by a single seed company, and there can be, those varieties can be very vulnerable to being lost to the community if there's, for instance, a crop failure. In terms of seed production, again, Bill highlighted a lot of things that we had written, and we also discussed some challenges that for very particular types of crops, like dry seeded crops and biennial crops, or crops that take 2 seasons to produce seed, those are some additional challenges, and more work with places like University Extension could be helpful in bridging some of those challenges. And also then for seed distribution, again, we highlighted the seed producers and seed saving communities in the Northeast, and Chris brought up CD Saturdays as a organization in Canada for saving and distributing seeds as a big strength of the region. A challenge here was lack of clarity around seed origin and seed catalogs, and perhaps some false sense of for consumers that there are a lot of options or there's a lot of different sources of these seeds. And also for plant breeders in the commercial sector and the public plant breeding sector, a lack of clarity on how our sectors should or can interact with community seed saving efforts and rematriation of seeds, and what the appropriate role of what we could be there. Yeah, and that's kind of as far as we got, and I do tie into some of the other themes below. Yeah, does anyone from the group want to add anything to what I said?
I think that was great. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so much, Lauren. All right, can we hear, we have 2 more groups to hear from. Emily, do you want to?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, again, just be the facilitator speaking on behalf of the home-based seed work group. So one thing I think is just maybe interesting to start out saying is that even though it's the home-based seed work group, there were a lot of community themes running through that too, because the community is so intrinsically related to, individual seed work as well. So I'll just start from the top and give some highlights. In terms of germplasm, well, one challenge is as a beginning gardener, not everybody's knowledgeable about what terms like that mean. Seeds for a particular region might come from outside that region. And so growers might have a hard time finding, what is really appropriate for their region, and, having confidence that what they're getting is adapted to their region. One strength, though, is that there are a lot of local people to learn from, local seed savers who can share seeds that they have grown and saved over several years and that are adapted to the climate. As far as seed production goes, one person in the group had a really good mentor that they could speak to in their community who had a lot of information and just a lot of good practices around purity and avoiding cross-pollination. So they found it really helpful to just have, access to people in the community who could help them figure out what some good practices were. A challenge, though, is finding, those local seed saving groups. Sometimes it might be hard to connect with them. In terms of seed distribution, another great example shared was that somebody works with kind of a community harvest and picking and distribution of the seed. So when the seed is ready to harvest from the community garden, they invite people to come, be hands-on as part of that process and get some seed to take home with them. The pandemic, has really highlighted the need for people to save seeds in their local community. So those are positive things. Some challenges would be, just inexperience of saving seed and wanting the confidence that what you are sharing with other people is viable, has good purity, and doesn't have any issues that you might be passing on. For climate, it seems like folks felt like their climate was really amenable to seed production. Lots of, seasonality, the 4 seasons were there. The big challenge, though, is the unpredictability of the weather that's increasing with climate change from year to year, changing frost dates first and last, changing zones, things may be getting warmer over time, and then wondering how to find germplasm that continues to be adapted to those changing conditions. For policy and politics, well, community gardens, if you're really coordinated with, the folks in your community garden, sometimes you can just grow one variety year to year and don't have to worry too much about cross-pollination with other varieties. But sometimes that can be a challenge because you might, in a community garden setting, lack some strict isolation and just need help finding alternative solutions to that. We skipped a couple of the categories, but information and resources, both people in the group felt like their local extension services were really great resources, even had some seed saving resources and some grants that they could apply for. But a limitation to that is needing, website access to find that information. And then lastly, for community relationships and communication, again, the educational events at the community garden, demonstrating different stages of a plant, how to gather it, how to store it, how to gather the seed, store the seed, were things that, were really, really positive strengths of the community. But sometimes it was hard to, for everybody to access the proper means of storing what they took home. So might not have access to all the seed storage supplies that would be helpful. Also might be limiting to communicate with different growers in the community garden plot around what they might want to save seed from and integrate that into the broader plan of the community garden. So those were some pretty great highlights from our group. Anything that I missed, guys?
No, I think you even said it better than I thought it. Thank you very much.
Cool. Well, your words. So great job, guys.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emily. And so now we're going to go to Caitlin.
So we did all of these questions within the framework of community seed work, which is definitely a different framework for other people. So we were looking at access for germplasm as strengths and assets, as well as all of these. Some of them were actually both strengths as well as challenges or vulnerabilities to overcome. So for example, a lot of these we did mention about GRIN, which is like the government germplasm network or whatever it is, seed vaults type thing. And getting that access, you have to be able to speak a certain language and also have access to internet, as Emily did mention. There's also Cornell University with their plant breeding programs, as well as the Seed Savers Exchange does have their own vaults as a nonprofit, and their community yearbook exchange, which is a backyard farmer or hobbyist who you can actually connect with them personally, and they will give you seed in exchange for shipping, as well as different private collections such as the Roughwood Seed Collection and different universities who we would be, as community seed works, seed libraries, different things like that, we would be able to get those from those people. However, The other challenges that we had was that who is actually controlling the germplasm? What is the breeding focus? Is it an individual's private collection, and do we have to contact them in individual batches? As well as the age of seed keepers, and is there a plan in place for who's going to continue stewarding the seeds when they are no longer able to? There was also brought up the ethics of growing seeds and where we did source our seeds from, and who were the original people who grew and domesticated these seeds, and the cultural appropriateness of the seeds that we are growing and selling and distributing, as well as the desire to rematriate those seeds whenever possible. And within seed production, we had a really interesting conversation about this because we did include sometimes commercial growers for these seeds, so commercial seed companies and farms who are growing and producing these seeds. However, at the same time, that's did bring up a conversation about like who is growing our seeds, who has access to these seeds, and is that something that we want to continue to rely on as community-based seed work, and how to shift the focus from that. We also did highlight the Seed Shed Network, the seedshed.org, as well as the Experimental Farm Network as different places for information and resource, as well as people who are producing community seed. We also did talk about the challenges of having contract growers, access to organic seed and organic seed growers, the cost of land and land access, as everyone has been talking about. But we also did discuss community seed production and finding local seed growers and savers, as well as the funding for these different people. What type of labor are we using? Is it all volunteer work, and essentially the economic pressures around that? As well as the education and importance of seed saving, keeping seed, and the accountability for seed origins through community seed sources. We also did talk about the seed distribution for communities and the coopgardens.com. There is co-op gardens that have actually been established, and people can go and check those out, as well as the Seed Savers Exchange has a free seed distribution project called Herman's Garden that we did talk about that, as well as distribution of local seed through seed swaps. And there's also the challenges of that is that we are during a pandemic. How do you get to those events in person? How can we ship those online? And also the shipping of those. And not just that, but also the growing of them. How are we growing them? Is there standards for good practices, as mentioned before? And the differences between how do we want to be a seed library or versus a seed company. And for climate and environment, we did talk about the NOFA Connecticut Ecotype Project, the Experimental Farm Network, and then a couple of different things such as PASA, which is the Pennsylvania Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, and all the different chapters of the Northeast Organic Farm Alliance, as well as Penn State, so different agricultural schools. The challenges were that where are people growing it? Do people have access to land? What exactly is the Northeast region? Climate change, and also the different environmental issues such as fracking that might happen. We also did touch on, are the seeds adapted to the region and what that looks like. For policy and politics in the highlights and strengths, we had the Organic Seed Alliance, Organic Consumers Association, and other lobbying orgs. But then, of course, the challenges were organic versus conventional seed, organic certification, and then how do seed laws apply to community seed, and then also the enforcement of that. For power and access, we did talk about different places that are actually trying to educate people and actually keep things going. For example, the Reclaim Seed NYC, Soulfire Farms, True Love Seeds, the Seed Shed Experimental Farm Network, a couple of other things like that. And I'm expecting that all of these things will be released later or compiled for other people to share if they want. And then the challenges to access are Cornell University. They actually are a great strength, but also can be a challenge because they're doing all these really great things, but then it's all in their hands. And if they lack access or lack funding, what happens to us? So land access as well, funding as well. Those are all challenges and strengths at the same time. So marketing economics for community seed networks and seed works. Seed shortages are a positive for us because everyone is actually trying to find more options for what they're looking for and how they're going to actually get access to seeds and grow it. And then some of the different challenges that the market and economics for seeds, community seed, is the volunteer work, the cost of growing it, land cost, as well as the issues of patents, as I mentioned before, and the PVPs, which is, what was it, plant variety protection, and then also, of course, the funding for it. And so for information resources, we had a lot of different things. And I have mentioned before the communityseednetwork.com. We also did mention coopgardens.com, as well as Seedshed. So as well as like the Northeast Organic Farm Alliance, the Pennsylvania Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, something called Sci-Hub, which is actually a website for access to science research without having to pay for it, without the paywalls. Different universities with food system programs, and individual people. But one of our challenges was, the question is that, is community seed high quality? And are there like standard good practices for that? And are they actually remaining true to type? For community relationships and communication, that is all about what community seed work is about. And people are definitely looking at it. And a lot of the different websites that we mentioned before were mentioned here again, and also just creating those relationships and then sustaining those relationships. So that was all like positives. We didn't really have a negative, but now that I'm thinking about it, lack of access to internet would also be a challenge, because you can't really have in-person events as much anymore. And that it definitely, in this age, internet is vital access to it. And it used to be like, oh, if you don't have internet, you could just go use the free computers at your library. But with the pandemic, that also is a challenge now. So that's what we're thinking about. So thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much. So we heard from everyone now, and we kind of moved from a grounding to identifying, challenges and vulnerabilities. And in a little bit, we're going to be in our next and final session, we're going to be moving on to action. So in the about 6 minutes that we have left, we're going to throw it open to community discussion. If anything came up for you, or questions you have for another group, things that resonated, things that you're curious about, please unmute yourself.
I had a question for the home growers group. I was just kind of thinking if it would be nice to combine with the community group, because my question is, where are home growers, where do those seeds end up? Are they mostly just saving them for themselves, or do they have little networks or seed libraries?
Good question.
There were only 2 of us in the group, so it's hard to answer that. For this last session, Nicholas and I really did touch a lot more on community-based gardening, so perhaps we could combine the 2 in the future. But from my experience, it's mainly if people home-based, you're saving seeds for yourself and perhaps sharing with friends or going to seed swaps, etc.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that question, Katie, we conducted a survey last winter just for Vermont Seed Savers, and we identified 250 people throughout the state who saved seeds and had 150 responses. And overwhelmingly, people are saving seeds. And as Anthony suggested, it's seems to be primarily, at least in the case of the people who responded to the survey, those close networks, informal seed saving groups, and so forth. We're now working on a project where we're going to be looking at seed libraries and trying to understand who is providing seed and how the use of seed takes place in Vermont seed libraries. And so we'll be able to kind of analyze a little bit more those connections, or at least some of the connections between home-based seed work and some of the community organizations. But I do think at least the evidence that we have supports what Anthony was saying in terms of the usage of the seed that home-based seed work is, people who are engaging in that work are doing.
Cool. I would love to see that study.
We have, sorry, yes, and I see in the chat as well, we do have a summary report that we can certainly, well, I will follow up sometime this week to everybody here. I know there's been some requests for the slides and the Power Flower worksheet, and if it's of interest, we can also attach the summary report of that survey. We're still, processing data and so on and so forth, but certainly happy to share the initial results that we have.
Very cool. Yeah, something that came up in our group was seed production, and we had listed all these seed companies, but then we were like, well, what about the communities that are growing the seed? And yeah, I would love to see how you do a census of what backyard gardeners are growing. I think that that's really interesting and important for community seed libraries.
And I'll just add a little bit to this. So Indigenous Seed Keepers Network through NAFSA, the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, is engaging in seed census work for Indigenous communities. And so there's a lot of worlds within worlds within worlds within worlds in seed work. And so it's great to hear something, Daniel, like what you're doing, which is like finding individual seed savers. But when we also think about culture and racism and like who feels good about filling out a survey and who doesn't feel good about, if for a white person going into an Indigenous community and being like, hey, are you saving seeds? Like feels very different than a trained representative from Indigenous Seed Keepers Network going into their own Indigenous community and asking people what seeds they're saving. So, I think there's no one place that could really do an exhaustive survey like that. And it feels like we need folks within their own communities engaged in that work in order to really get that bigger picture of the interconnectedness of all of us, and also the places where maybe it's not okay to have overlap, and we don't need to.
And at the risk, sorry to jump in again, but yeah, Kate, I think that it's a super important point. And one of the serious limitations to that study that we did was in a state that is predominantly white, the responses were almost exclusively white seed savers, and did not capture people of color who are saving seeds. We do have some other work that in Burlington, the New American Farmers that we've been working with the Bhutanese and refugees from East Africa to understand their seed systems. And that is a very different scope of work and much slower and requires really strong community partnerships. And of course, there are other communities as well that, as you're suggesting, Kay, it's absolutely essential to have people within those communities engaged in doing this work. And so it's slow going, but hopefully as we're all doing this work, we can compile it collectively and look at it at larger scales.
And definitely like a language justice piece to all of that too, for these kind of online surveys.
Yeah. Well, Jackie, should we? Yeah. So we are going to conclude this session, and we will start off the third session with a little bit of a recap and a little bit more of this discussion if there are things that people want to continue to discuss for a few minutes, and then we will go into our final breakout and really dive into the vision for the future. Where do we want to be? Where should we be? And how do we envision getting there? What do we need to get there? So don't forget, if you have not registered for that third session, to register, as it will be a different Zoom link. Jackie, any other concluding
No, that's it. Thank you everyone for more of your time on this Sunday, and we'll see you back in a little bit.